This is a PowerPoint presentation on Book 2 of the Aeneid. There are quite a few new characters that are encountered within Book 2. Something to remember that may be helpful is as you are reading, to compose somewhat of a family tree or a diagram of the different characters and insert them, add to it, take away, just something to help you make a visual connection with the different character names because there are so many that are introduced. Here you can see Laocoon as the Trojan priest of Neptune, Sinon, a Greek soldier captured by the Trojans, Hector and Cassandra and Hecuba, who is on down, are ones to note together because that is King Priam's son, a daughter, and then Priam's wife. And this is Priam is a character that you would actually remember from the Iliad because he is the king of Troy. Then there's Pyrrhus, who is the son of Achilles, and he is also referred to as Pyrrhus Neptolemus. Minerva, who is that is the Roman name for Athena, who is someone that is more familiar. Then Anchises, Aeneas's father, Creusa is Aeneas's first wife, and then of course Helen, who is the queen of Sparta and the wife of Menelaus, lover of Paris of Troy, and basically the face that launched 1,000 ships that of course started the whole Trojan War. Just a brief bit of background for the summary of Book 2, just to kind of recap. But remember, we are getting Aeneas's retelling of events to Dido. Like most epics, or all epics, the story begins in medias res, or in the middle. So in order to get the knowledge of all of the events, we are dropped as the reader into the middle of the story, and Virgil has allowed us to get the behind the scenes story or the backstory through Aeneas's retelling of events to Dido. So in doing that, he is going to give the story of the Trojan horse, how the Greeks sneaked in and inside the belly of the horse, and then under the cover of darkness and of night, when everyone went to sleep, they sneaked out of the horse and took over Troy, thus causing Troy to fall. However, before the horse was actually taken into the city, remember that it came up outside the gates of Troy. Laocoon, who was a seer, warned them against taking the horse in, but when he warns them, that omen that occurs, he is killed. He and his sons are coincidentally killed by a snake. So with with that in mind, someone who is warning you against doing something, and then all of a sudden he's taken out, it was kind of a no-brainer for the Trojans to go, well, we'll just take him on in if that's what happens to someone who is against this. However, Sinon was a defector basically from the Greek camp and was tricking them, telling them that he was trying to leave and the Greeks had turned against him. They wanted to sacrifice him. He wanted to come to their side. And so meanwhile, he is just tricking them and trying to get them to bring the horse into the city. So it was all just a big trick. Then, in a dream, Hector urges Aeneas to move forward because Troy is falling. So Hector, who is, remember, the son of Priam, killed by Achilles, comes to Aeneas and says, the city is under attack, you must leave. After that, Troy falls, and Aeneas meets Pyrrhus. And Pyrrhus is far worse than Achilles ever thought of being. He is bloodthirsty. He does not adhere to the code of honor. So he's really a nasty character. One thing that Aeneas does do that is basically strays from what is thought of as the typical or archetypal Greek hero. Even though we're talking about Trojans, we still refer to as a typical Greek hero because that is basically the premise or the beginning of the groundwork of what a hero is compared to the Greeks and the code that they have established. But Aeneas thinks about killing Helen, but in the end decides not to because there's a lot of pent up anger and resentment towards Helen for her causing his city to fall. And then there is the refusal to leave the city of Anchises, Aeneas's father. And then the telltale sign to urge them to leave is the flames that appear on Ascanius's head. This is another omen of warning that you must leave the city. But Ascanius's head does not burn, so therefore it is concluded that this must be a sign for them to go. And then on the way out, Creusa is left behind, Aeneas's first wife. They don't realize it. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but she is left behind nonetheless. So, to look at these things a little more, there are some similes that give the events of Troy a heightened sense of tragedy. And as we discussed in the introduction video, that Virgil basically mimics the style of Homer, because Homer was so very successful in his epics that doing this would basically try to reassure that his epic poems or poem would be a success. So the similes that Virgil gives is that Aeneas is like a bewildered shepherd. He is frantic, trying to get a hold of his herd, his people, his sheep, to leave the city. And then the women of Troy, this would be Priam's wife and his daughters, hide like doves in a storm. And the storm being the falling of Troy, and also Pyrrhus, who is out to get them. And then Troy falls like a tree off of a mountainside. Virgil's lyrical writing style is he gives very descriptive battle scenes and tends to lean towards a sense of heightened realism that is thought to be by most critics at times very humorous, because he never experienced any type of battle. So this would be something that he did not have firsthand knowledge. However, he did write about it. Again, Aeneas is portrayed as the model Greek hero. He is determined to participate in a useless defense of Troy, not once thinking of himself. And this goes back to that theme of selflessness versus self pleasure, and one that we will explore later. It takes 3 supernatural interventions and an appeal for him to think of his family before he is convinced to leave the city. And this would be the sign of the snakes, the flames on Ascanius's head, and then ultimately a thunderbolt by Zeus. Another theme to explore and to keep note of is that rationality and self control are shown as he forsakes his opportunity to die a glorious death. Remember that the one who died a very glorious death would be Achilles. However, he chose to do that and not live a long life. So this is more because of this choosing to live. Virgil notes that it is a transformation from a barbaric aspect of Greek life into a more civilized Roman. Aeneas walks out with his father and son, and we will talk more about this symbolism again as we continue our reading, but he carries on his back his father, which represents the old ways of Troy, and takes with him, that is leading him by the hand, is his son Ascanius, who represents the new ways of Troy, the future of Rome, and Aeneas acts as a bridge between the two. Things to note are to remember, and this would be something that could be, followed as we get into Paradise Lost as well, but this theme of the snake motif. Laocoon's killers foreshadowed the destruction of Troy, because remember, the snake is what came up and ate Laocoon and his sons. And then Pyrrhus, is Virgil notes, is like a snake fed on poisonous plants. He is absolutely evil incarnate. And then Sinon's name, Sinon, remember, was the Greek deceiver who came to try to trick the Trojans into bringing the horse inside. But his name is a parallel of the Latin word for coils, which is like a snake, and it is a reference to the English word of sinuous, which means coiled. And then there's the thought of the uncaring gods. Neptune does not save Laocoon, and Minerva or Athena chooses to destroy him. So this in turn shows that the gods turn their backs on Priam and his family. And then there is Venus's actions against Dido that will be discussed later on to prove her merciless. So overall, Virgil's idea, especially with this war here in the beginning, and there's going to be a greater war later that we're going to read about, but Virgil's idea is that war is pointless, it is a waste, He focuses on the anonymity after death. Because Priam's body lies headless on the beach. This was something that after Priam was killed by Pyrrhus, his body was thrown out. So after all that he did, after all that he um, uh, led his people, he is cast away as if none of that was important. And then that goes on to reiterate the point that Virgil tries to make, that war is again pointless, and that this idea of peace, pacifism, would be the better route to take. Hector's return, his wounds symbolize the fall of Troy, and then Aeneas, his actions against Helen are contrary to the ideal Greek hero because he shows such a lack of compassion. So these are just things to follow, to take note of as you are reading. A suggestion would be to keep these themes in mind, and as you are reading and you see examples that could refer back to this, to make note, because this will make better connections for you and will make essay writing easier.